Hey everyone, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where we help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. My good friend Jeff Reed is our guest on the Church Planting Podcast this episode. Jeff is the founder of The Church Digital. He's a dear partner to Stadia in helping us with all kinds of different digital church planting. He works with Leadership Network, New Thing Network, Exponential. He's just all over the place. He's written 2 important books, and I'm sure he has many more coming, VR and the Metaverse Church, and Sharing Jesus Online. Welcome, Jeff.
Awesome. It's a pleasure, Greg.
Hey, Jeff, you're all things digital when it comes to church, but I'd just love to hear, because we haven't dialogued in quite a while. What are some things that you're most excited about in the digital church space right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, 2023, the year here, we are seeing lots of churches trying to go back to physical. And we're seeing even planting going back to that model. And that model's great. That model's necessary. But the thing that most excites me is we're seeing this new wave of planters, these innovators that are out there that are trying to do something new and something different. They're looking at churches that are existing without physical buildings. And are getting out there and doing evangelism and doing discipleship and engaging in these digital communities for Christ, like literally engaging in digital communities, in digital space with no physical building, trying to engage people in that space for the cause of Christ.
Well, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. The first question, you said you're seeing this new wave of planters, Jeff. What do they look like? I mean, if we've got people out there listening right now going, man, I'm thinking about planting a digital church. I mean, is it all over the spectrum or there's some characteristics that are common? What are you seeing?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, Greg, I picked some of this up. I started to see that when I was at Stadia, where I was seeing maybe even back in 2021, I was seeing 50 to 60% of the people that were interested in planting a digital church were bivocational, as much as 75%. And at this point, like it's 85, 90% bivocational. What I'm also seeing is very few have sending organizations, sending denominations, sending churches. Like the physical church infrastructure just has not yet really embraced this idea of a digital church. And so as a result of it, pastors don't know how to be supportive. Denominations aren't ready to even call this a thing for the most part. Some are starting to come around. And in most cases, even spouses and friends of the planters don't know how to be supportive because they've never seen it before. And so we're really seeing this new wave of bivocational people that are curious. And honestly, but when they get to me, they're like, I'm not even sure this is like possible. What do you think? And honestly, after having this conversation literally hundreds of times, 500, 600, 700 times, at this point, there's very few ideas that are new. There are other people that are doing something similar. And so it's like, hey, let me introduce you to your new friend over here who's actually trying to plant to do the same thing on their own. So
Jeff, you and I actually met at a Blue Sky session. We invited a bunch of Christian techies from the business world in, and then some people in the church space like yourself as well. And we got together for one question: is digital church planting possible? And we left there saying, okay, not only is it possible, it's imperative. So I think we've got to get beyond the is it possible question, right? And the theology of it. I mean, the pandemic advanced all of that, and suddenly it was okay for every church to have a digital presence online, right? But talk about what you're seeing most. Are you seeing mostly pure digital church planting? Are you seeing phygital, a term we coined where you got a physical location and a digital presence? What are you seeing most of?
So the idea of physical plants that are engaging in digital, that's probably the most popular, where they're utilizing digital to hyper-focus on an area. So, it's funny. I always think of our friend Patrick Holden up there, actually near where you live, Greg, right in Ohio, or is he?
Yes.
Columbus?
Yes.
Where is he actually?
He's in Columbus, Ohio. I now live in Cleveland, Ohio, Jeff. So he's about 2 hours south of me.
Okay, perfect. But he does a great job of using digital to hyper-focus on the Columbus area. And so he's utilizing digital to drive people into the physical space.
Okay, how's he doing it? I mean, give us some example. What's some practical tips, some practical things people are doing? Maybe they have a physical location, but they're using digital to enhance.
Yeah. So targeted ads, even targeted to like a street address, to a corner, is a great way to do it, where you're utilizing and getting ads in front of people. Now, another way to do this is to create a persona where you are targeting a type of person. And this may seem counterintuitive, especially for some of our larger churches that are out there that are listening. But if we really want to be effective connecting with people digitally, it's not trying to reach everyone. It's actually trying to reach someone. To be effective, actually, we need to aim at a smaller target to essentially hit more people. And so really that's what we're seeing some of these planters that are in this space that are really utilizing digital, either for a physical church or for a digital church, to really be effective. It's reaching a smaller target. It's aiming at a smaller target to reach those people.
Okay, now you're saying, I heard you say that post-pandemic, you're watching a lot of churches pull back from technology, from digital. Why do you think that is?
You know, in COVID, we had a lot of churches, like hundreds of thousands of churches, adapt a digital strategy with a proverbial gun to their head. When they were rushed, under fire, hey, let's get like the church service online. And now they're wanting to go back to the building, and they don't want to do the church service online. Now, if I'm honest, the church service online is probably not even the most effective thing that your church can do digitally. And so the fact that churches want to pull back from that, well, shoot, even my church, the plant that I work with, it's actually a Stadia church plant, Reality Church down here in Miami. We don't stream our church services online. We have all the technology. We just say, literally, my pastor said to me yesterday, we were talking about it. He said, Jeff, I love this idea of what Erwin McManus said. If you really love physical enough, if like physical church is your thing, don't cheapen it by putting it online. But that doesn't mean you don't do anything online. It means you do other things. And that's where you can really lean into discipleship, disciple making, relationships, engaging in digital communities, relational building, digital missionary teams. Like there's so much other strategy, other things we can do utilizing these digital tools beyond the streaming of the service. And really, I think the challenge of 2023 is for churches not to keep streaming the service. Like I'm fine with the stop. But it's, hey, now, 2023 post-COVID, let's actually take the time to develop an effective digital strategy to help churches understand what discipleship and disciple making can be digitally.
Okay, so this is fascinating because thinking through a digital strategy. I mean, that was not something I ever had to deal with when I was senior pastor of River Tree. It wasn't even an option at that time. And, so let's just say I'm out here, I'm listening, I'm in a new church startup, or let's say I'm a church, a mega church. What's the first couple steps of developing a digital church strategy?
So let's look at this idea of discipleship. The goal of every church should be to make disciples. Go and make disciples, Matthew 28. At least every Stadia church I ever helped and worked with my time there. That was the heart. That was the purpose behind every one of those planters. And so you're doing that in physical space. But what's interesting is a lot of churches struggle to see how to do that digitally. And so first and foremost, we need to accept, is it okay to make disciples digitally? Or is the idea of discipleship, do you have to really breathe the same air molecules? Like, do you have to be able to physically touch the person in order to make disciples? Now, there are some churches and people that are stuck on the physicality of discipleship and the quality of disciple-making relationships, but there are far more at this point, post-COVID, that are ready to embrace this idea of digital. And so now as you're able to embrace this idea, well, now you're starting to run some experiments. Like, what does your physical discipleship process look like digitally? Is it solid? Is it effective? Or are there holes? In many ways, discipleship in digital space is different than physical because it reaches a different type of person. And that's good because now we've got two different ways we're connecting with people to make disciples, physically and digitally.
Okay, so yesterday I had an hour-long Zoom call with Mindy Calaguire, who I know you know. one of the gurus of soul care in the country, and with Wes Stafford, who past president of Compassion International and chaplain to Stadia's board. And I meet with them once a quarter via Zoom, and it's for my own soul care. And essentially, it's discipleship. And it is, I got off that Zoom call with them, and I walked into my wife and I said, man, I am so fortunate to have people in my life like them that will ask me hard questions, give me guidance, encourage me. And it was pure discipleship happening online. This morning, I had a leadership coaching call with Mike Tooley, who helps me with organizational structure or staff and team building and issues. And again, it's a form of discipleship that I meet with Mike regularly, correct? And so for me, I'm going, man alive, I'm sold out on this idea. And again, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater as far as physical relationships. I just know the richness and the depth that can be attained in today's world of Zoom. Now, when you are talking to leaders today, the ones you're dealing with, what are a couple of the big barriers that you're seeing? Why aren't more people doing exactly what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's a lack of understanding. There's this idea that it has to just be the weekend service, that they're overvaluing what happens on Sunday morning, and that's essential for digital.
We have a tendency to do that, don't we, Jeff?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even in my own life, like I'm looking for ways, and when I help churches, like I tend to get on this. Maybe it's even a chip on my shoulder of, man, can we do something other than the weekend service? Can we do something out? There's other ways to do that. And what's interesting is actually I just wrote a blog for Leadership Network on this, where it's like time for our digital churches to grow up. It's time to get off of the milk of the weekend service, and it's time to start to get to the meat, to the solid food of actually discipleship. And for us to expect that, I think the challenge is where we are not expecting anything digitally. Even pre-COVID, I had an executive pastor tell me, Jeff, what I love about you is like you're like icing on the cake. Like everybody else does all this hard work to make the church service happen, and then you, the digital guy, come in and you're like, boom, and like you like 4 times the numbers with your online viewership, and that's awesome. And it was funny, this was an executive pastor, a former boss, and he was a really good friend of mine. And I had the pleasure of looking at this executive pastor in the face and saying, okay, that was maybe the most offensive thing you have ever told me in my entire life. Let me actually explain to you what we need to do here with digital and how it fits. But that's what we have, this 0 level expectation, whether it's because we're afraid of what digital can be, whether we're afraid it's going to conflict with it, whether we're not interested in going outside or beyond. And what's fun for me at this point, Greg, and Stadia has been so helpful in establishing this in my life. Like we were ground zero when COVID hit together, running Phygital, hitting the ground running. And I even still today, was it 2 days ago, somebody came up to me and was like, hey, you're the Stadia guy, aren't you? And I totally got to have this like long conversation with them because he recognized me from that season. But what's so fun in this is going with the goers, is not trying to battle with the churches that are negative towards this. I could tell you names of people that have shot bullets at me in my organizations. Like these are well-known, established people that you would recognize. But the fact is there's so many other people that are seeing success in digital discipleship and digital missionary evangelism, digital metaverse mission fields, virtual reality churches. Like there's so much good that's happening in this space. We can't say God's not moving. We are literally seeing him do it. We just want to go with those that are going and are giving it a shot.
Okay, so you and I were talking before the podcast began, and let's just say I'm launching a new church, or I'm even an existing church, and I'm here in downtown Cleveland, and the transition right now with digital is to stop thinking of ourselves as this church in this one location, but the potential not just to be here in Cleveland, but also to be national and even to be global. Are you seeing that happen anywhere?
Yes. As a matter of fact, oh my gosh, City Center Church, which is another Stadia plant up in Berkeley, California, where it's funny. They actually spun up 1 or 2 micro locations, honestly, without even trying. I believe one of them's up in the New England area, where they were just doing online and doing online discipleship, and that online discipleship, national based, actually sprouted and grew into a physical microsite location literally on the other side of the country. There are many churches that are seeing this. And really what I would challenge is that, digital is not the virtual gathering place. Like, the purpose is not to gather hundreds or thousands of people in a virtual room. But I think digital is the Roman road. It's the scattering of the gospel into starting new opportunities, like in this situation, or I'm always friends with Tyler Sansom over at Church Anywhere, churchanywhere.us, First Capital Christian. He's lead pastor now, where a church of 700-800 people probably is reaching that many people again,
at least
micro locations scattered around the city. That's not even talking about their national level broadcasts that they're doing. An 800-person church in a 3,000-person town is essentially reaching 2,000 to 3,000 people off of their physical, off of their micro, and off of their digital broadcasts that they're doing.
Okay, you're talking about the church scattered now. So that leads me to a question. Your most recent book, Sharing Jesus Online, the church scattered. Talk to us a little bit about Sharing Jesus Online.
Yeah, so pastor out there, planter, the best resource you have right now is sitting in your pews. And rather than griping about why they're not coming back to the building, or they're only coming back to the building once every 3 or 4 weeks, what if we gave them a spiritual purpose outside of the building? And this is what we really got into with this book, Sharing Jesus Online. It's a very simple, easy to remember evangelism framework to allow people to share Jesus online, whether these are people they know or these are people that they have yet to meet. We're seeing people do this in everything from like Facebook all the way to virtual reality, utilizing this framework. I wrote it with Dr. John Harris, who's a church planter, digital church planter, hearts like his. And to be honest, we stole, quote, borrowed, quote, Dave Ferguson came up to me and said, "Hey, Jeff, you should write this book." And I responded by saying, "Yes, sir." And so,
yeah, exactly, right?
Exactly. When Dave Ferguson says, "Write the book," you do it. But we basically used Dave and John Ferguson's BLESS framework. Begin with prayer, listen, eat together, serve people, and share Jesus. But what Dr. John and I did was we basically remapped that framework out on digital and metaverse space. So how do you begin with prayer? Well, that pretty much stays the same. How do you listen digitally into the metaverse? There's some intricacies with that, some challenges. How do you eat together? Okay, eating's weird. What do you actually do when you eat together? You sit down and you have a conversation. You are heavily relational without an agenda. Well, you do that digitally through shared experiences, through playing video games together, or in the metaverse, virtual reality, walking around some of these worlds, or sitting at a virtual coffee house or a restaurant. Like there's ways to do this stuff digitally. What does serving look like? What is sharing your story, sharing your Jesus story look like digital metaverse? That's what we talked about in the book. And because we wrote it for Exponential is like, hey, we're going to give it away for free. And so that resource is available to anybody right now at sharingjesusonline.com.
sharingjesusonline.com. Okay, make sure everyone, you read that book. Jeff, I was with Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, and he told me that within the next 5 years, the virtual reality will transform our lives in the same way that the smartphone has transformed our lives. In the next 5 years. Now, that kind of blew my mind because smartphone has literally, it's hard to imagine the impact it's had on our lives, right? He's saying VR will transform our lives just as much in the next 5 years. What are your insights? Give us some thoughts on VR, church.
Well, I've never actually known Pat Gelsinger to be wrong. So 5 years sounds like that's a pretty attainable number. I've heard insight from Apple insiders saying that the iPhone and any iOS device will be useless in 10 years, that instead everything's going to be moving to augmented reality or mixed reality. And so these headsets, these glasses, even the Google Glass, which was just before its time, like this is where we're going. And what this is going to do for the church, I think it's going to do two things. I think what we're currently seeing in 23 is communities that exist within these virtual reality spaces, these where people are gathering socially, and the church is being inserted. The church is going into the mission field. There's 71 million, I believe, that may be the number. I believe it's 71 million active virtual reality users in America today.
My son is one of them.
Yeah. And so it's beautiful. My kids are on it as well. But churches, and this is a Stadia church, Lakeland VR, and some others are being very aggressive. Cornerstone VR, Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale, Virtual Reality Church, VR Church was a church planted in virtual reality, only virtual reality 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago maybe. Like there are very innovative churches that are getting into that space and connecting with people. They're treating virtual reality literally like it's a community where you're planning a church. Like I'm talking walking around virtual reality. I'm talking prayer walking. I'm talking walking up to strangers and having conversations, gospel conversations, literally the Bless framework, doing that in that space. I can introduce you to a person who has actually shared Jesus over 2,000 times in virtual reality. And what's interesting is the particular social world that he went into is to do that is like the low dark. This is where there's like a lot of strip clubs. This is where there's a lot of bars, a lot of lostness in this space. And my friend literally sees it as a mission field to go and to share Jesus and to be the light in the dark space. And so seeing that happen now is a huge step, because I believe community will expand as Apple releases. They have a goggle headset, I think that's going to come out, sounds like June or so. That's going to be a big game changer. Meta, Facebook's obviously working on some things, so you're going to see that. But I'll tell you, Greg, the next thing that's going to happen, I believe when Apple releases their mixed reality glasses, where it's not like the awkward headset, but it's more of the like a eyeglass set or something that it's more form functional and clean looking. What you're going to see is the lines, the barriers, the borders break down. So much of the physical church says that I can only communicate with people because in physical space. I can't communicate with people via Zoom. There's Zoom fatigue. I can't talking on the phone with somebody, I can't really read their physical body language. Where this technology is going, and this is really what Pat Gelsinger is hinting in the next 5 years. I'm going to be wearing a pair of glasses. Through that glasses, there's going to be a hologram projection. And so I'm literally at Starbucks sitting at a table, and my wife, who's on the other side of the country, is going to be sitting hologram version in the chair across from me. Like, this isn't something out of Star Trek. This is something where they already have the patents in place and they're working towards developing it. So what we're actually going to be seeing is a lot of the challenges of, hey, you know what? I can't read body language on Zoom. Hey, you know what? It's really frustrating when I'm talking to a computer screen in a camera. I miss that intimacy, that closeness. That closeness is a couple years away. And when that happens, what excuse are we going to say about doing discipleship in digital space? When I can connect with somebody virtually at the same state, at the same level I can in physical space, almost more so, better so, easier. Why not do digital discipleship? It's interesting, just in closing, the biblical scholars have told me, because I've had these conversations, ecclesiology, what are we doing? And really pushing, like to your point, Greg, come on, it's post-COVID. Can we get over this stuff? I've had the scholars tell me, literally guys who have written dozens of books on this. Hey, Jeff, it's going to take 10, 20 years for the church to really work out the ecclesiology on the metaverse. Because the technology hasn't rolled out, because they haven't seen it. Like once the technology finalizes, give it another 5 to 10 years after that, and then the church will get on board. To be honest, that's sad. Like, could we not get ahead of the ball for once? Like, can we not like champion some of these innovators and maybe learn some things before, it gets too late? We're already on to like Web 6 by that point. I don't know. I'm venting here, but what do you think, Greg?
I think that it starts with your ecclesiology, right? And it's sitting down and saying, defining what is a church. what makes up the attributes of a church. And so, this is no new conversation. Good heavens. Is a mega church, is a giga church really a church? Is gathering 20,000 people in person, is that what the church was supposed to be? But then that leads you to, is a micro church a church? Is an expression of 8 people meeting under a tree in Africa a church? And so when you come up with, hey, this is the definition of the church, which we've spent a lot of time at Stadia working on, then you can come to the conclusion and go, by golly, yes, digital church is a church. And I learned this from you. If God is omnipresent, the big theological word, he is certainly present in the metaverse. He is certainly present in our virtual gatherings because he's everywhere. So Jeff, I want to come back and just say, the question that I was asking Pat Gelsinger when I was talking to him about technology is, how much should Stadia as a church multiplication organization be leaning into technology? And here's what Pat said. He said, first of all, you have to do business as usual. You can't just, there's always going to be a need for new physical church plants. And I'm not sure that the word always is correct, but because I don't know the future, but we'll say in the foreseeable future, there is going to be a need for physical locations and physical gatherings. Man, I couldn't agree more. And at Stadia, we plant lots and lots of those, as you know. But he said, technology is not going away.
Yep.
It's just not going away. And you can either lean into it or you can go hide from it. You can capture it for good, or you can let evil use it for dark purposes. And he said, so with church multiplication, you have to lean into that space. And I think the same is true for every church that's listening right now, and every church planter that's thinking about planting. Jeff, as we kind of wrap up our time together, lots of people out there, I know they're going, okay, I like what I'm hearing, but I want to learn more. Gosh, Jeff, can I call you? How do I get involved with Church Digital? Give me a step for them to get in touch with you and your organization.
Yeah, awesome. What we have literally launched just within the past couple of days, a new consulting business to help established churches figure out how to manage this. It's interesting. 2022, to be honest, I tried to do it all myself and just got overloaded with calls and said, hey, you know what? I need to build a team. And so I surrounded myself with digital and metaverse experts, people that are doing this, that have done this. Some Stadia planters, some established church, just this rock solid team. And to be honest, when you add everybody up on the team together, years experience, we've got over 50 years of digital experience in this. And so you can jump into that process. You can have a conversation with myself or anybody on the team over at yourchurch.digital, yourchurch.digital. Go over there. You can take a free digital impact survey, have a conversation, start to figure out how we, the Church Digital, can help you in that. And so simple process starting over at yourchurch.digital.
Jeff Reed, the Church Digital, thanks, my friend, for being on the Church Planting Podcast.
Always a pleasure. Love what Stadia is doing and can't wait to see what's next.